President Trump joked today that his friends would understand this, but he said that Lindsey Graham never met a war that he didn't like.
He's been discussing on the programme. President Trump met President Zelensky of Ukraine and Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in the Oval Office. The two leaders were amongst those who'd gathered in Washington to attend the funeral of the Senator Lindsey Graham, the late South Carolina Republican senator who died earlier this month. Known as a foreign policy hawk, Graham was working on a new Russian sanctions bill and had recently travelled to Kyiv to meet President Zelensky. President Trump delivered the eulogy at the service.
Virtually everyone, Republican or Democrat, liked Lindsey. Well, not everybody, but it sounds good. Not everybody. He was a tough cookie, okay? I have to veer from this for a second. He was a tough cookie, darling, but he was beautiful.
Well, let's talk to Caitlin Doornbos, who is foreign policy and national security reporter at the New York Post. Hello, Caitlin.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
Really good to have you with us. It was really quite a lineup, wasn't it, at this service to remember the late Lindsey Graham.
It was quite a service. Not only was the service beautiful, but also all of the things that were kind of coming together as far as diplomacy-wise on this really important day of Senator Graham's funeral, seeing that align with his legacy.
For people listening to this programme here in the UK who may not have known too much about him, tell us a bit about Lindsey Graham, why he was such a big figure in US politics.
Yeah, of course. So Lindsey Graham started out in the military and was a colonel by the time he ultimately retired. And then he also served in the Senate as the state of South Carolina's senator. And in that time, he really focused on dedicating his time on the military as well as on the foreign policy front. President Trump joked today that his friends would understand this, but he said that Lindsey Graham never met a war that he didn't like. And that was definitely in jest because he was known as a hawk. He thought that the United States needed to live up to its values of being the forefront military in the world. And so that means he was very big in advocating for Israel and Ukraine in most recent of his advocacy. And then prior to that, he had deployed multiple times to even Iraq and Afghanistan while he was serving in Congress to support the troops and support operations in those wars.
I mean, it's interesting that at a time that many in the Republican movement were very wary of President Trump's decision to go to war with Iran alongside the Israelis, Senator Lindsey Graham was one of those hawks, as you say, who was very much saying that this was the right thing for the US to be doing.
Yeah, he really was. He had a lot of influence and would often call President Trump to give him the latest on what we thought that he should do. He was also a good friend of Prime Minister Netanyahu and would have a lot of phone calls with him and tried to bridge that gap as well as he could. Now, the president didn't always do what he wanted, and the prime minister certainly didn't always do what Lindsey Graham wanted, but he was a key figure in that space. And now a lot of people are looking to Congress to see, is there anybody else left who can really serve in that capacity to be an outside advisor really to the White House on foreign policy the way Lindsey Graham was? I mean,
yeah, the other key conflict in which Lindsey Graham was such an important figure was the war in Ukraine, because, I mean, we've seen from throughout the war in Ukraine, President Trump has been quite reluctant to wade in. He halted much of the financial and military support that President Biden was providing to President Zelensky. But Lindsey Graham had been pressing him to do more to help the Ukrainians in the war with Russia.
Yeah, he really had and continued to up into literally his last day. He was in Ukraine very often throughout the course of the war. And then for the past year, really has been pushing the Trump administration to advance this Russia sanctions. And he ultimately took that and created that into a bill that will be voted on tonight preliminarily here in Washington, D.C., where it would put 100% tariffs on or 100% sanctions on the top five oil purchasers of Russian oil and a lot of other things. And it's going to be interesting now because kind of the common joke was that the White House would say, oh, yes, President Trump greenlit this. It's going to be onto the floor. So many times I've heard that from both the White House and from members of Congress, and it just never happened. And then today, maybe it's symbolic, but today, on the day of his funeral, I think we could very well see the passage of that to get it actually onto the floor and voted for in Lindsey's memory.
So that measure, these additional sanctions against Russia, could actually go through tonight.
Well, it wouldn't be a final vote tonight, but what the vote would happen tonight is start that process. Ultimately, we're on a time crunch right now, so the House is already out of session. They would have to vote on this when they get back after August 31st, but it would start the progress and be the most substantial step forward in getting those sanctions passed than we have seen throughout the entire Trump administration.
Senator Lindsey Graham's death was very sudden, wasn't it? There have been some questions raised about whether it was simply a heart attack, which I think is the official reason that was given.
Yeah, it was that there was a problem with his aorta. There were some blood vessels that broke and ultimately killed him. There was a lot of speculation that, frankly, I haven't even. There was a lot of speculation that perhaps Russia could have been involved in his death. They do have certain nerve agents, different capabilities of being able to cause the same thing that Lindsey Graham died from. Of course, the official cause is saying that it was naturally caused. They didn't find any agents that could have caused it. It was perhaps his health. But there's a lot of questions still there. And I've spoken to people who have said that they are familiar with Russia actually carrying out some of these attacks and that it's entirely possible, but no proof yet, though.
Just finally, it is really rare, isn't it, to see so many people from right across the political spectrum and right across the world come together for the death of a senator.
It really is unusual. And I think that it's also a testament to Lindsey Graham and the way that he tried to operate in the Senate. He really tried to reach across the aisle. He tried to work with people that he had disagreements with. Vice President Vance spoke to that today at his funeral. And as he lied in state in the Capitol, again, that's another big symbolic moment of him to be able to lay in state. His coffin was brought into the rotunda. That's a special honor that's not often given out, and it also speaks to Lindsey Graham's importance here in the United States.
Caitlin Doornbos, foreign policy and national security reporter at the New York Post. Really good to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.